In my opinion, there are three types of haunted houses. There's the type where you go in and it feels really heavy. The type where you go in and it feels like someone is watching you or maybe even following you from room to room. And then there's the third one, the one where you feel something brush up against your leg or touch your arm, but when you turn around, there's nothing there. Well, today, we're going to talk about that third house. It's the one that makes you question whether or not you're alone, even though when you look around, no one is ever there. What I'm talking about is a house here in Salem, Massachusetts. It's a home that was built back in 1792 and is now part of the Salem Maritime National Historic Site. So during the busy tourist season, this house is open for tours. But after hours, well, no one is supposed to be in there except for the caretaker. For those who don't know much about Salem, Massachusetts, let me catch you up real quick. Back in the 1600s, this town was a prominent port city. Back then, it was known as Naumkeag. And by the 1700s, the name had been changed to Salem. And this is when things started to get crazy. The first permanent English settlement in what would become Salem was founded in 1626 at an area known as the Great Neck. They called this place Newtown. It was a small settlement of only a few families. In 1630, the General Court of Massachusetts Bay Colony decided to move their capital from nearby Charlestown to what was known as the Great Neck. However, the local Native Americans were very unhappy with this decision because the land had already been promised to them. When they refused to move, the settlers just killed them. After all that, the capital was moved once again to Boston. By 1688, Salem Village, which would later become known as Danvers, broke off from Salem Town. There was tension between the two settlements over how the taxes were being collected. These tensions would eventually come to a head in what became known as the Salem Witch Trials. Between February 1692 and May 1693, there was a mass hysteria that swept through the towns of Salem Village and Salem Town. Over 200 people were accused of practicing witchcraft. A special court was convened to hear the cases of these alleged witches. 5 men and 3 women were hanged as a result of the trials. So with all that in mind, let's talk about some of the strange happenings that have been reported within this historic home. Now, this home was actually built by a ship captain named George Derby. He was one of the wealthiest men in Salem at the time. He amassed his fortune trading in the West Indies and South America. When he returned to Salem, he built this grand house, which would become known as the Derby House. However, not everything was as it seemed. You see, behind his successful business dealings, he was also involved in the slave trade. He owned several plantations in the Caribbean where he grew crops such as sugar using slave labor. And so it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for this wealthy man. Years later, his granddaughter married into the Proctor family, so the home would come to be known as the Proctor House. One of the most famous stories associated with this house involves a servant named Elizabeth Proctor. One day, while she was cleaning out the attic, she found a wooden box hidden under some floorboards. Inside this box, there was a leather bag that contained human bones. She took the bones down to the kitchen and cleaned them up the best she could. Then she put them in a drawer. A little while later, she went to go get some water, and when she turned around, the bones were gone. She searched everywhere, but she couldn't find them anywhere. Days went by, and one night she heard chains dragging metal moans. She went to investigate and found the bones in her closet. Again, they were not there before. She tried to hide them away again, but her friend convinced her to tell her family about them. Together, they opened up the floorboards in the attic, where she originally found the bones, and discovered a skeleton wearing shackles. They carefully removed the skeleton and buried it in the backyard. To this day, no one knows whose skeleton it was. But this story gets even weirder because years later, someone was digging a hole in the backyard for a new addition to the house. And guess what? The construction workers found another set of bones. They were chained together, and they didn't belong to a skeleton that was buried there. Some believe that these bones may have belonged to a woman who worked as a servant for Captain Derby. Records show that he had a female servant, but we don't know her name. Some say that she was probably an indentured servant, while others say that she was taken from Africa and sold into slavery. There's a possibility that when Elizabeth Proctor found the first skeleton, she may have actually been looking at the bones of this African-American servant. Maybe she felt a connection to another enslaved person, even though she herself was free. Or perhaps she knew the history of the house better than anyone else, and wanted to give the woman a proper burial. Whatever the reason, there's something undeniably sad about this story. Two skeletons found hidden under the floorboards of a house, shackled together as if they were never supposed to be free. Moving on, there are other stories of strange activity that have been reported within the walls of this historic home. Many visitors and caretakers have reported hearing strange noises coming from the second floor, even though no one is ever up there after hours. And while some claim to hear footsteps, others say that they hear disembodied voices. Some of the voices can be heard singing old sea shanties, while others sound like they're having a full-on conversation. Sometimes the singing is said to be coming from a specific room, known as the music room. It's not clear if these voices are coming from the ghosts of the past or if they are simply figments of our imagination. But what is clear is that many people have experienced them firsthand. Many paranormal investigators have visited the house to try and figure out what's going on. And even though none of them have found any concrete proof of ghosts, that hasn't stopped people from trying to communicate with them. Some people have attempted to contact the spirits through the use of a Ouija board, while others have held seances in the music room. No one has ever gotten a clear answer from the ghosts. But that doesn't mean they're not trying. Every year, the house is decorated for the holidays, and the staff members say that every Christmas Eve, they hear the sound of carolers outside. But when they go to look, there's no one there. Perhaps the most disturbing story comes from one of the caretakers. I should mention that this person asked to remain anonymous. He said that he was working late one night when he heard a noise coming from the basement. He said, "I've heard scratching sounds in the walls, footsteps, the moving of objects, doors opening and closing, shaking of beds, rattling of windows, and on occasion, feeling like someone is walking right next to you." He continued and said, "One night I was working downstairs and I heard loud footsteps above me. I looked upstairs and saw nothing. Later that night, I was getting stuff from the storage room in the basement. As I turned the corner of the stairs, I felt something brush up against my leg. I spun around, thinking I brushed up against the leg of a chair, and I felt it again. I looked down and saw nothing." If you ask me, this definitely sounds like a case of ghosts. I mean, how else do you explain feeling something brush against your leg if there's nothing there? And I'm sure if you've watched enough videos on this channel, you've heard this excuse a million times before. But in this case, I think it checks out. I mean, why would someone make up a story like this, unless they were trying to cover up the fact that they'd restalking this guy or something? It makes absolutely no sense. To make matters worse, this caretaker wasn't the only one who felt something brush up against him. Another caretaker felt something grab his arm and pull on it. He described it as feeling like a hard tug on my sleeve. These strange occurrences have led many to believe that this house is haunted. Some say that the ghosts are friendly, while others say that they're downright scary. Regardless, no one can deny that there's something strange going on here. If you ever visit Salem, Massachusetts, I highly recommend checking out the Proctor House. Just be prepared for the possibility that you might not be alone when you go. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, check out another one on screen.